World War II had been in motion since 1939, and it would not be until 1941 that the United States of America would also join in the war. Over the course of World War II, the American home front would be instrumental in the battles against the Axis powers, and it would separate families across both sides of the Atlantic. The men leaving to fight, while women and older children would work in factories. The McNames family is one such family who experienced World War II firsthand, and two of the family members who remember their experiences are Lloyd McNames and his mother, Genevieve McNames. One of their major memories leading up to World War II is of December 7th, 1941.
It's a Sunday noon. We were having I lived here. We were having Sunday dinner.
That day, myself and the rest of the family were down at my grandparents in Mount Morris, Illinois. It's about 30 miles south of here someplace. And it was after dinner, and we heard this news on the radio that the Japanese were bombing Pearl Harbor. First thing I saw was all my aunts and uncles going into the Army. I had one uncle that was in the Philippines, and he was involved in that. He died, but not of war-related injuries from sickness. And I had a uncle that was in the Air Force, and I don't know where he really was. You know, I was pretty young, and I didn't, a lot of that stuff didn't sink in or stuff, you know. And my father also, he went into the Navy, and he was on a ship. He was a radio operator on the ship. He never said too much about what happened, though. And he was happy he was in the Navy, I think. Tell you guys that get in the Navy because you always get a good place to sleep.
He was on the USS Montrose, it was fatal. And that was out of the Pacific Ocean. I was very upset because I had 3 children. Yeah, it didn't sit very well, but we managed.
I was born in March 6, 1932 in Rockford Hospital when it used to be downtown. Yeah, I have 2 sisters, both younger. I don't know, I guess we're just kind of a regular family. There's 5 of us, and my father and mother both worked, so kids kind of took care of themselves. Average day in good weather was just walking about a mile to school every day and a mile home. School was uphill, by the way. And then in the winter, it got kind of tough because you had to walk the same mile through about knee-high snow and stuff, and it was pretty tough getting there. But strange enough, I made it most days. And back there, guys, winters used to be winters, and they used to last. I mean, it got down to be 20 below, and it stayed to be 20 below a couple weeks.
With the increased demand for industrial power in order to manufacture weapons, transportation, and other equipment, the American home front not only needed to utilize its expanded workforce, but it also had to sacrifice in order to bolster production. This sacrifice was the limited use of consumables and materials that were deemed necessary for the war. Metal was gathered from households and melted down into bullets, while sugar was rationed due to Japan limiting imports from the Philippines. Similarly, canned foods were also rationed due to a shortage in tin, which was primarily exported from Japan, and was also influenced by the military's need for longer-lasting food. Rationing would involve the use of ration books and ration tickets, which were provided by the government to the general public and would be traded for a set amount of the good in question, such as sugar, bananas, or bread.
We all gathered up all the metal, anything that was metal that went to the war. We mold sewing machine I had, all those kind of things were gathered up and sent overseas, I hope.
Bread was hard to get, bananas were hard to get, meat was hard to get. I guess it was just more of a nuisance. I mean, we didn't starve or anything, but there was a lot of things that we couldn't get gasoline, so we couldn't go all the places we'd like to go, so we stayed home. There was a lot of things that we couldn't get, and stuff was on rationing, like sugar and flour and Jell-O. The lucky thing was, at that particular time, I was working at a grocery store, so I got some stuff nobody else got.
Due to extended periods of time waiting for payment from the Navy and being without wages, Mrs. McNames soon became involved in the new force of working women outside of the then typical homemaker role. Beginning as a substitute teacher, Mrs. McNames soon decided to earn a bachelor's degree in teaching and began to work diligently in order to support her son and 2 younger daughters.
Well, I was satisfied with Rockford. Only place I'd been besides small town down here, Mount Morris, where I was born. I don't know much about Rockford. It had a lot of industry, much more, when I first came here. All the factories. I only had a high school education, hadn't gone beyond, so I did. So that led me to get into the Board of Education. So then I got called out to the country school. White Swan, went there as a sub, because their teacher was sick, I think. And they approached me if I wanted to go to college, I could have a teaching job. Well, there were no teachers available, and no subs. I would never have gotten called if they'd been available. And there I was, fresh out of high school. So I went to college, started. And I ended up with a master's degree by going nights, days, weekends. That wasn't very easy, but I managed. At the end of the war, I had a contract with the teachers and teach the first, second, and third grade in Marsh School. At the beginning of the war, I was not working. At the end of the war, I was teaching.
Aside from payments from the Navy, Mrs. McNames also received letters from her brothers and husband throughout the duration of the war. These letters were often left unmarked with no clear indicators as to where anyone was stationed.
Most of the aunts and uncles and stuff got drafted, went off to war, and I guess that was about the thing that made the most difference in it. It really saw that something was happening. And then you listened to the radio most every day to see what they said.
Well, I guess maybe it's a good thing I was working part of the time. I probably wouldn't have been very good, because my one brother got sent from Africa to Italy, and that was a very poor time. But he finally got home. I can't remember where my second brother was. I don't remember. He was someplace in the Atlantic. Yeah, where, I don't know. They were, we couldn't tell where they were. But the letters came from them, they were never marked. They had been opened and checked, especially when they were off the boat. And he finally ended up marrying a girl in the West, or part of the United States, and I don't know how he got over there. And my other brother and his wife, they went out on, they were Navy people too, but I don't know where they went. Didn't do much corresponding with them. So I made a point of destroying them. Isn't that a funny reason? Well, because I thought, well, these are all more personal things and would not be of interest to anyone except probably to me. And so I read them all over, and I discarded, I think, most of them.
As World War II came to a close, soldiers returned home from all over the world as the Allied powers celebrated their victories against Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan. With the end of the war came a new economic shift, as many returning soldiers started or rejoined families, and industry continued to prosper. Lloyd McNames remembers the return of his father and how the war was seldom spoken about by his father.
The day my father came home was one of my favorite memories, and most of it, when he's just come back after that, not much was ever said about it. Not unless you got with some other guys that had been there and they talked about things, but not to the family. I just remember that incident over at Iwo Jima. My father, their ship was dive bomb, a suicide bomber. That's probably the most I remember of the whole thing. We greeted him with open arms, but other than that, that's about all. Then he brought us back some souvenirs. That was nice. A Japanese helmet he brought back, and a canteen. I think he brought back a sword, a Japanese sword. I think some of those things are still out. My mother's in the attic, so. When the troops came home, there was kind of a big expansion, bang, building houses and all that stuff, and the economy was really going strong, so all these guys probably went back to work someplace, and they built a lot of houses and a lot of things, and that they needed for their families when they came here and got married. And so the economy was good then, right after the war.
He sent word they were coming home. And he sent word by telegram, I think, when. He came into Chicago, and he wanted me to meet him there. Instead of delivering my telegram, it lay into a mailbox. And he was home before I even got the wire. He walked in, I was ironing, I think, and I had no idea. He was near being home. So it was a shock. So both he and he was wondering why I wasn't in Chicago. I was wondering why or where he was. So I said, it's just awestruck, all of us. A lot of it is because they want to forget. A lot of it is that they know that you were home, you were interested too much in what was going on, so it really was not too much of a incentive to talk about it. They maybe talked about it with their men, but never became a subject.
As soldiers returned to society and departed from the military, jobs became a priority in order for the returning citizens to continue sustaining the families that they had previously supported through military payment. Unfortunately, jobs were not often easily or immediately obtained, as it was not uncommon for men to experience stress after the war, and receiving a job was not as easy for some as others. Mrs. McNames recalls her husband working before and after World War II, and also speaks of how he behaved after he arrived home.
Over the hospital for quite a few years, over 25 years, I think. He probably went to work, I would say, within 3 weeks, but he didn't want to go back to factory work. He worked in factory before he went to service. He never liked factory work. So he got into working It's a greenhouse, and yeah. So then he worked for there all, and as groundskeeper, and although he hadn't seen much of the war, he was over in when the islands were in the Guam, all those islands were under siege, and you get mellowed. You get to look at life a little differently when you're out, I guess.
World War II began on September 1st, 1939, and it would later end 6 years later on September 2nd, 1945. Over 65 years later, Lloyd McNames and his mother would reflect over what happened during the war overseas and at home with events such as the Japanese internment camps, the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Holocaust, and the overall thoughts on the war. With these closing thoughts, Mrs. McNames especially reflects on World War II and how it pertains to today's generation, as Lloyd looks back at how he had originally viewed World War II as a child and shares his modern thoughts regarding the war.
They discriminated against them, and they rounded up all the Japanese and put them in camps. So there was discrimination. Then they had German prisoners of war out at Camp Grant, and they didn't care for those people too much either. Everybody knew that the Germans, and from all their news reports and stuff, they were the bad guys. And countries they invaded all the countries around them right off the bat. Poland and Czechoslovakia. I don't know, there's 2 or 3 or 4 countries right around Germany that they invaded right away. Italians signed up with the Germans, and they were fighting too. Then our troops had to go to Italy. I guess there's some rough fighting there. They got a lot of rough ground in Italy that they had to fight over. And then the Japanese, they didn't have too good a name either, because they'd done some things that we didn't think were nice or they shouldn't have done. So these death marches and prison camps and things like that. I think it took a while before most people got back seeing Japan and Germany as maybe someone we could live with and trade with.
I think that all children should have some kind of a background of what has caused them to get where they are in life, because we just take it for granted and never think about the reasons why you're still here. I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone through World War II. Well, I don't like any war. And I can't really stop to think about all the young men and women who lost their lives. I don't think the war ever accounts for itself. Maybe it does what politicians want it to do, but I don't know. But you and I, except that you're here, by keeping your country free and all that, but and I still don't know that war is the answer to our problems, but someplace along the line, it comes in.
When I first joined the Harlem Veteran Project, I thought it would be a great way for me to better broaden my horizon and to better prep myself for the outside world. I remember looking down the list of names as they were passed around, and the name that definitely caught my eyes first was Lloyd McNames. And the reason why was because instead of being a soldier, Lloyd had a perspective that I felt that I hadn't learned well enough, and that was the American homefront. And I also realized that Lloyd had footage and images provided by his mother, who had passed away back a couple of years ago. And when I looked through these photos and I looked through both their recordings, I realized that there was a lot of potential in working with 2 separate people in order to create one documentary documenting an entire life of a family who had a lot of relatives gone overseas during the war. And I can definitely say that going into college this year, I have learned more from the Harlem Veteran Project than anything else this year. I personally don't think I'm ever going to have as big of an experience as I have had walking through this project. And I definitely feel that with this experience, I can definitely move forward and keep this experience in the back of my mind as I continue through life.